to the Sick of It podcast with me, Emily Forbes, where we talk all things life and disability. Today I'm joined by Molly, a registered nutritional therapist specialising in the gut-brain connection and nervous system health. With her personal journey navigating Crohn's disease, Molly brings a compassionate and insightful approach to her practice and helps women uncover the root causes of their health concerns to achieve lasting transformation. So welcome to the podcast, Molly.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. There's so much I want to talk to you about today, but maybe just in terms of starting off, by way of introduction, could you tell our listeners what your personal experiences of ill health and Crohn's are?
Yeah, so the reason that I am kind of in the position that I'm in today is going all the way back to when I was in university and I was diagnosed with Crohn's. But it took me, so those of you who don't know, Crohn's is an inflammatory bowel disease. It's an autoimmune condition. It's not technically the kind of grey area of whether it's a disability or not, depends on the severity of symptoms. So I've got an interesting relationship with the kind of idea of it as a disability from my personal standpoint as well. It's autoimmune. It's a chronic disease. It took me about 18 months, almost 2 years to actually get that diagnosis. So I was in uni, you can imagine, not really looking after myself that well, but I knew that I was having these symptoms and I was going back to my GP time and time again. And they were saying, it's just IBS. You've just got IBS. Go away, basically. And then I got as far as to going into the doctor to see the consultant. And they also said, no, it's just IBS, kind of go away. So this was when I was away from home at uni. And this was maybe about 18 months. And during this time, I was getting really poorly, collecting symptoms as well that now I know are all related, all kind of a picture of Crohn's disease, lost a ton of weight. And it was only when I went home during a summer holiday, and as soon as I opened the door, my mum was like, oh my God, you're so ill. What is wrong with you? She took me and kind of advocated for me. I got my colonoscopy, which is how you get the formal diagnosis. But even without that, with her taking me, the consultant at home was like, I think this is Crohn's. And very quickly I got seen, I was put on steroids and I was medicated. So it was a bit of a battle to even kind of get that, get the diagnosis and kind of formally understand what was wrong with me. So there's a big part about advocacy there, I think, which is really a really interesting topic and something that can be really tricky, especially, for a young person who doesn't necessarily know how to stand up for themselves and how to navigate the system.
Absolutely. And there is a huge gender health gap when it comes to self-advocacy and listening to women, particularly around medical issues. I read some research recently that women just don't feel listened to. 4 in 5 women who've presented at a doctor with symptoms, with problems, with issues are so often fobbed off. In my own health journey, at the beginning, when I kept choking on food all the time because of the swallowing issue that I have, I kept getting told, oh, maybe it's anxiety, or maybe you're just a bit stressed because you're a young mum and you've got a full-time job and you're busy. And it's very easy to not listen to someone when they know what's going on in their body. And as you were saying, you were collecting all these symptoms, but struggling and battling for that diagnosis in itself probably makes the journey harder. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. And I think we are told to, look to doctors. Obviously, absolutely have their place, very important. I'm not kind of anti doctors at all, but it's important to also understand that they might have that medical knowledge, but your body. And I think just to build on that point that you said about the kind of the stats around women, if you look historically about how frequently women have been told, it's hysteria, it's anxiety, it's depression, like all of these things that women are told they're mad, basically. And obviously a lot around kind of women's hormonal health, but the fact that it also exists in completely unrelated systems of the body, and that it's still happening is crazy.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know we still need to work hard to change a lot of the misconceptions, stigma, and also about allowing women to have a platform for their voices to be heard. It's not that we need a voice, it's about getting them heard, isn't it? And I think things are starting to change. We are seeing more naturopathic doctors, we're seeing more lifestyle, health, and well-being advice, and more linking up holistically, which is also something that you're doing.
Mhm.
So, can you talk to us before we go into your role and how you work now, maybe a little about how you've learned to manage around the challenges of Crohn's and what life's like for you now?
Yeah. So I think the kind of first part of my story was where we got up to and I got the diagnosis. So it was a real stretch for that. And then the part two was when I was in hospital, I was really curious, okay, so what shouldn't I do or eat or drink? And I was told repeatedly, nothing. You take the medication, nothing that you do, nothing that you eat, nothing that you drink can make a difference. And at the time I thought this doesn't sound right. But I was young, I was still in uni. It was kind of the best answer for me at the time. So I took the immunosuppressants for years, and I always had this kind of little thing in the back of my mind, like something about this doesn't quite seem right. Um, and that's how I then started just collecting bits of information. And
Mm.
this is, pre kind of Instagram boom, really. So there wasn't nowhere near as much information as there is now. But if you think about, you hear this from this person, you collect this diet, you try this thing, I was vegan, all kinds of different things for a time. And it actually got me much worse because, I was collecting bits of information, putting all these things together, this puzzle of kind of rules that I was making up for myself, and got myself quite poorly. And I developed a secondary disease called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's when you're develop your the microbiome is there's too much, there's an overgrowth of a particular strain of bacteria, and it creates lots of gas and lots of bloating. It's really uncomfortable and really hard to get rid of. And that was kind of the result of this 2 years of kind of making it up. I then went to get help and I saw a nutritional therapist, and actually having that person to firstly listen, understand
Mm.
what I'd kind of gone through and that journey of looking for help in all these different places. She really helped me firstly understand my body, because up until this point, I had a chronic digestive illness, but I didn't understand how the digestive system worked. So to have someone to talk that through with me, to really teach me how to eat for my very particular set of circumstances, and to guide and coach me through that, was kind of the second part of that for me. And it really unlocked so much. Yeah, and then that's what eventually led me to retrain myself as a nutritionist.
Fabulous. And how are you enjoying that now? Being on the sort of, I suppose, as coaches and helpers, mentors, advisors, often we're the person that we needed at the beginning of our
Mm,
journeys. So, specifically for me as well, in the same, I was looking for someone who could help me and I couldn't find a single person that had the answer. There seemed to be lots of different bits of
mhm.
information. And so I decided, okay, I'll become a well-being coach to help other women who are dealing with all of this. And similarly, you've become a functional nutritionist because of that too. So how are you enjoying that side of the fence, I suppose?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's, everyone is different. So there's different challenges. You're always learning. And I think that's to the point of, how is it now that I am over this side? It's the same with my own health. I don't think it's kind of as binary as kind of ill or well. And in the same way now, it's kind of, I'm always learning. I'm learning from my clients all the time. There's new science all the time. So it's amazing to be in this space where I can still learn, but I understand the kind of parameters and the science and how the systems of the body work. And I get to apply it to different people. And, understanding how different minds work as well is fascinating. Like getting one person to stick to a protocol. Some people are really data driven. Some people, they are really visual. They need more check-ins than others. It's endlessly learning. And I think it's really fascinating. And I feel really lucky to be doing what I'm doing now. And obviously I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the chronic illness in the first place. So it's all kind of tied up together.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, the hardest challenges in our lives and the adversity that we're facing comes the greatest possibility and sort of new beginnings, because if I hadn't been chronically ill and unwell, then I wouldn't be doing what I do either. So yeah, sometimes it can be a gift, but it's wrapped up in awful packaging, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
So I am fascinated by the gut-brain axis and the connection there. So talk to us a little bit about that, because I don't know, some of the readers may have heard about that, but they may not be, fully au fait with it.
Yeah, so the gut brain axis, the gut brain connection is, we can break it down into looking at the vagus nerve, which is a nerve in the central nervous system, and it connects the gut and the brain. And it's basically a two-way pathway. They're constantly communicating with each other. So, in a very simple terms, if you think about, a child might say, "Oh, I've got butterflies in my tummy," or we say, "Oh, I've got a really bad gut feeling about this." All of those things, that's the vagus nerve and that's the gut brain connection. So it's something that we inherently know as human beings since we're children. Oh, something doesn't quite feel right. And that's a kind of manifestation of this nerve and of this connection. It's something that I learned in college and I apply with my own clients, but it's only a couple of years ago I had a really bad year personally. And it's the first time, possibly jumping back to my Crohn's disease, actually, since working with that nutritionist, I then got off medication and was in remission. So that was kind of the end of that story, just jumping back. But a couple of years ago, I had a really bad time personally, and that nervous system activation and that kind of PTSD really triggered my Crohn's again. And that's what made me realize, oh my gosh, like this gut brain connection and stress is so key to everything really, especially in digestive disorders. And someone who can be, I've really got everything under control in terms of my symptoms, my food. But, if you get triggered emotionally, you can be, right back to where you were. So ensuring that you've got the really resilient stress responses and nervous system support is so key for everyone, but especially those dealing with digestive issues.
Absolutely, yeah. I've just finished writing my first book, and one part of it is particularly about this interconnection between the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And you can't really separate all of those out. And sometimes, you've got the medical model that sort of, you're ill and you get given a pill and you try and sort of make it better that way.
Mm.
But I'm looking more at the sort of biopsychosocial model in the way that, okay, well, where's the stress trigger that causes the emotion, that causes the physical feeling, that then impacts the sort of cellular level of biology? Is absolutely fascinating how all of those things link.
Mm.
And in terms of the vagus nerve particularly, and polyvagal theory, have you found any particular sort of exercises that you would suggest to others to really calm the nervous system and sort of get that vagus nerve working, I suppose, optimally?
Yeah, totally. So there's lots of easy and I will state free things that we can do. I think at the moment in wellness, there is you could easily spend thousands of pounds on, bits of kit and supplements and all kinds of things that are not necessarily right, for you. There's lots of things that we can do that are free.
Hmm.
So deep breathing. We want to do anything that can get us into a state of rest, digest, and reproduce. So deep breathing, a very short amount of deep breathing will put us from fight or flight back into rest and digest. Things that create what we call vagal tone, so hot and cold showers. Again, if you want to go wild swimming, sauna, ice baths, brilliant. But you can also do that in the shower, hot shower, then cold shower. That can stimulate the vagus nerve. And then things like humming, gargling, singing, all of those things that create vibration stimulate the vagus nerve as well. So there's lots of easy ways that we can do that whilst, going out our day-to-day life that are not costing us loads of money. Okay, maybe you don't want to hum and sing down the street, but there's ways we can easily integrate it into our lives.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's all about layering up as well, isn't it? So, if you're thinking maybe about mindfulness or being in the present or in the moment and trying to be relaxed, say, often you get given the example of, okay, try focusing on something as you're doing the washing up, for example. Well, then actually, if you maybe had the radio on and you were singing when you were doing the washing up, that can, you can sort of have that presence, that moment, that connection whilst doing a very mundane activity, actually, can't you? You don't need to be, going in ice baths and saunas and
Yeah.
paying, for a lot of the sort of kit as you talk about. Um, have you used any vagus nerve stimulators or modulators yourself, like the actual electronic devices, and what's your opinion on them?
Yeah, so I've tried one of those. I think what you're talking about is the one where you clip it onto your ear and it creates like an electronic uh, pulse, and it stimulates the vagus nerve that way. What I love is an app called Nerva, so Nerva. It's created out of Monash University. So they're the people that developed the low FODMAP diet. All of the kind of IBS crew, I'm sure, will be familiar with the low FODMAP diet, but they recognize that actually cutting out lots of food longer term is not beneficial because we need as much diversity as possible as long as we're not allergic and we can tolerate it. And they have created this app, and it's a 6-week course of gut directed hypnotherapy. So it's lovely, like 15-20 minute visualization exercises that you can do. And the stats on it are amazing. They're as effective as the low FODMAP diet. So you're creating that resilience within the digestive system, working on the gut brain connection, that vagal tone, whilst not cutting out food groups. The aim is to, always eat a bigger diversity as possible. So that's a tool that I really do recommend people using.
Incredible. I have read about that tool and how it's sort of like CBT, but in a very specific way, directed at the gut. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. It's visualization. It's lovely. The word hypnotherapy might put some people off, but you're very conscious and present, and it's just helping to strengthen the gut brain connection and get you to a place where you're building that digestive resilience. So I recommend anyone to give that a go.
And also, a lot of our serotonin and sort of happy hormones are found in the gut, aren't they?
Absolutely. So I think, you kind of can't really pull out one from another. And that's what I love about functional medicine and kind of what you're describing in your book. Congratulations. I'm writing a book, by the way. Functional medicine is that everything is connected, all the different systems of the body. So we're kind of used to seeing a specialist about this and or this system or that system. But we work on the basis that everything is connected and that also everything is underpinned by the health of the gut. And research, more and more research is coming out every week about gut health and about the kind of approach of functional medicine.
Yes, definitely. And I've been looking at a lot of research papers, particularly in the long COVID era now as well, and in terms of chronic fatigue syndrome and ME, and how you can sort of, if you trace it all back, something has triggered or shocked or affected the nervous system or the autoimmune system or the endocrine system, whichever sort of body system it is. And given it, for some reason, it's starting to work in a different way. So how can we go sort of back to our blueprint and look at how can we look at the root causes? And I think a lot of the work that you're doing is helping women find the root cause rather than sort of masking it. Is that fair?
Yeah, totally. We work in functional medicine. We try and find, okay, what are the things, the antecedents, or the things that you couldn't help, that whether they're your genetics, whether there was something that happened when you were a child, your the triggers. So was there a big life event, which sometimes can be physical, but often it's a huge stressful impact. So whether it's a divorce, a bereavement, sometimes a PhD can be quite a stressful period of time, a house move, a car crash, something that's really big and a trauma kind of to the mind and body. So that's kind of your root cause often. Sometimes it can be something like food poisoning or mold exposure. So those are the things we kind of can't do anything about, but it's good to really understand what they are and what's laid those foundations. And then what we're really interested in is the drivers. So what's driving that forward? What's making sure that you are kept in the current state that you're in? So that could be anything from, maybe you are having a huge fasting window. It's too long for you. You need to be eating earlier in the day. Maybe you are eating something that is disrupting your digestive system. You're not getting enough sleep. You have a really stressful job. You're not getting outside in the morning, all of these different things. And when you put them together to create a lifestyle, you realize that actually what you're doing is driving forward and keeping those symptoms going for yourself. So it's about understanding what the trigger is, like what the root cause is, why are we in this situation, and then what are we doing that's keeping us in that situation.
That's a really, really good way of describing it for people, I think, because often we might try and find the root cause and sometimes we can't find it.
Mm.
So, if a lot of people might be, say, going through a diagnosis, like we talked about earlier, and maybe self-advocating or not being heard. But regardless of getting the label or the diagnosis, actually, if you're still if you've got different parts of your life that are still driving that dysfunctionality, then we can have a bit of control over those areas. So what would you suggest if someone is experiencing, digestive issues, collecting up their little basket of symptoms, which we all sort of do in the chronic illness world, and feel a bit overwhelmed maybe by what can I start to shift or change? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I think there's things that we can all do. So collecting data on yourself, I think, is really valuable. And also, if you go to a doctor with I feel a bit off, or if you go to a doctor with I don't feel great and here's symptoms and also what's been happening to me for the past 3 months, that data is really valuable. So it doesn't need to be like a smartwatch or anything. It can literally just be write down like how you're feeling, and we can start to pattern match and create patterns and kind of see what's happening. Generally, for anyone, you want to kind of just have a bit of a spring clean. This is a good time of year of your diet. So how much ultra processed food is in your diet? Can we eliminate that as much as possible? Is your hydration okay? Are you getting around 2 liters of water a day? How is your sleep? How is your stress? Are you moving? It's really basic things, but often we're kind of looking for this silver bullet, and we can have that thing. Sure, there's expensive testing we can do and there's expensive protocols, but I would say the first thing that we could all do is address those quite obvious things that often there's a bit of resistance to. And then I would say, if you're still not understanding why you're getting the symptoms you're getting, supporting stress, massive one. Support stress, whether it's using the Nerva app or just however you want to do that, the Calm app, whatever is calming for you, make sure you're prioritizing that. And then get support, whether it's from a functional nutritionist, whether it's from an acupuncturist, get someone to, whether it's from a health coach, get someone to guide you, because one of the worst things I think you can do is what I did, which is be a magpie and collect all these different things. Some of them might have worked if I'd followed them through, but without the coaching and the guidance and the understanding why I was doing it, I didn't follow anything through to the end. So I just did like a week of, 10 million different things, and that's not going to get you anywhere.
I think I should say, I think that's probably one of the issues with supplements. If someone comes to magnesium, it's amazing. I do find it useful for joints and restless legs and cramping. But and then someone will say, oh, well, have you checked your vitamin D? What about your B12 levels? What about this? And I think we're sort of, as you say, we get that magpie shiny new syndrome. In my book, I've actually got a long list. It's a ridiculously long list of sort of all the different modalities, options, sort of like Reiki healing or acupuncture or chiropractor or all these different things because you're just searching. You're trying to
Yeah,
find
yeah.
the answer. And that human nature of sort of curiosity
Mm,
and probably control, I want to be in control here. I want to know what's going on. Sometimes leads us down a very long garden path, and we need to sort of pull back and come back to those really simple
mm,
lifestyle pillars like you were talking about. How's your mindset? How's
mm.
your stress levels? How's your nourishment, your hydration, your sleep? Um, if people are feeling that they've looked at those and they're still getting maybe nausea or cramping or pain, then what's the next level of sort of testing, if you like, or supplements or the next level of input maybe that you would have as a functional nutritionist then?
Yeah, so if someone came to me and they'd been, as you described, had tried various things and looking for more help, there are lots of amazing functional tests that we can do. There's stool testing. Some that I do most regularly is stool testing. So that is a sample of your stool, and it will show you your inflammation panels. It will show you your dysbiosis. It shows you the breakdown of all the different strains of bacteria in your microbiome. Shows you if you're below in some of them, shows you if you're overgrowing in other ones. So there's lots of real valuable data that you can then, because there's the idea test, don't guess. So there's loads of things that we can do as low hanging fruit. But if you're doing all of those, get the data and get functional data. So the data you might get from your doctors is, are you ill or are you well? And
Mm.
it's not that binary. There's loads of things that we can do in kind of in between those things. Similarly, the Dutch test is a real gold standard hormone test. So, that tests all of your levels of hormones as well as your cortisol, how it's interacting, how your body is detoxifying it. And it's really valuable to really get under the hood and see what your body is doing rather than guessing. And then you can get super targeted with your supplements, and it doesn't matter if then someone says, oh, have you tried this? It's like, no, it's okay. I'm taking this because I know that it's what is going to be better for my body in this state and in the state I am in right now. And I think just to build on that as well, this idea of like searching for, I obviously had chronic disease and I'm in a much better place now, but our bodies are always evolving. Like there's different seasons, and especially as women, there's different seasons hormonally. So it's not like ill or well. And I think to stay curious about your own body as well, it's often really, it's talking to you, learn what the signals that it's showing you. And you might be well and feel a certain way for a particular amount of time, it could be years, and something changes. And it doesn't necessarily mean that anything's wrong. It's just that you need to adjust things slightly as you get older, as your lifestyle changes, as you need different things in different seasons of your life.
I love that analogy and that thinking about seasons because we need to be able to be fluid. And I talk a lot
Yeah.
about, adapting, adjusting, flexibility. I also really like your ill to well spectrum. And I talk about that too, because having chronic illness, you can also live well with that
Mm,
because you've got chronic disease or disability in the body. It doesn't necessarily stop you in other parts of your life. But it's learning to live well within your, I suppose, optimum window of tolerance
mm,
then. What works for me might not work for someone else. Or because, a GP says that my iron levels are fine, actually, a functional therapist might say, oh, I think you're a bit on the low side here because the medical model, as you say, is very much in a window of you're ill or you're not ill. We need to do something about this or we don't. Whereas the word for me is more about functionality
mhm,
and ability and capacity. So, how can we learn, or how have you learned to grow your capacity and grow your own resources alongside these different sort of, you've had flare up of issues which were triggered by emotional health.
mhm, mhm.
Obviously, you had a chronic disease initially that was cured, but sort of came back. So, how can we learn to better grow our resources and our capacity to deal with the sort of fluctuating health in life, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it's a really nice thing to think about. probably the first thing is just to recognize that, we're not machines. So the idea that we could just be working this kind of 9 to 5, the go, go, go that we're almost programmed and told we should be able to do, that's not normal. So giving yourself leeway to understand that we can't go at 100% all of the time. I think it's partly about building it in, especially if you've got a chronic disease. It's like, where are the periods of rest? Prioritize yourself, book yourself in your diary as you would another person. If you've got a free evening, don't give it away. You're like, no, that's for me. And so build it in, and then also allow for kind of flexibility. And if things come up, like, they come up with the best will in the world, you can't plan for everything. And then I would say, lastly, just to stay curious, what is working for you at the moment? Listen to, don't run to every new thing that you hear, but if something resonates with you, if you find a practitioner that is qualified and registered, very importantly, explore it, but explore it thoroughly. Give something, depending on what it is, but give a supplement 3 months, give a practitioner 6 months, a year, to see the changes. And often the shifts aren't the same as, you're ill, you take antibiotics, feel better. Like, the shifts aren't that quick. So it's about constantly reflecting and seeing the changes that you're making gradually over time.
That's really good advice, because I think that sort of titration effect, or the little bit by little bit, the 1% every day. If something is shifting in the right direction, it's not until you're 6 months down the line, you look back and you think, wow, actually I couldn't tolerate that 6 months ago.
Mm.
Now I can. So you don't see the progress. The final thing I wanted to talk to you about was intolerances or allergies,
Mm-hmm.
and working with the gut and digestion. You talked about intestinal overgrowth bacteria, but do you work with people who've got significant intolerances as well, and so they do have to look at what they're actually intaking?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got allergies, which is a very specific immune response, and that, is to be taken very seriously. Same with intolerances. But the difference between an intolerance is there's a world where you can build your digestive system resilience and your immune resilience so that you can reintroduce those foods. So if you have an intolerance test and it comes up with various different foods, it's definitely a good idea to remove them, but we remove them temporarily. The same with, I mentioned the FODMAP diet. Really, unless you're allergic to something or really struggle to digest something, we want to be including as much as possible whole foods in our diet. So I would suggest you remove it for a period of time, work to repair and rebuild and rebalance your digestive system, and then one at a time reintroduce those foods, all the while watching what happens. So you reintroduce milk, for example, and see what happens both in your digestive system, your skin, your kind of new mucus production, your sinuses. See what happens, and if that's okay, you leave that for a few days and you reintroduce something else. So it's labor intensive, unfortunately, but there is a world where you can reintroduce especially beneficial things that you don't want to be cutting out like 10 different types of vegetables for the rest of your life. The different colors in vegetables represent different nutrients. So eating like a bowl of rainbow veg, that's taking a multivitamin, so we want as much as possible to be food first.
Yeah, absolutely. And the link between food and mood and that color of the rainbow has also been proven, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The connection, like you said, the serotonin that's made in the gut, getting all of those different nutrients. It's the food and mood connection is absolutely, it's huge. Making sure you've got enough fats. That's something that I think, if you remember when we were growing up, kind of fat free, it's 0% fat, whereas actually good fats we need. So oily fish, avocados, olive oil, it's really important to get enough fats in your diet. And it's also really important for blood sugar balance. So fat is one of the things that stabilizes our blood sugar, spikes our blood sugar the least. So if you add fat and protein to your meals, rather than just naked carbs, which is what we have a lot of the time, toast, pasta, sandwiches, if you're making sure you've got good quality sources of protein and fat, you're also having a smoother blood sugar reaction. So you're not on this up and down blood sugar roller coaster all day, and then you're grabbing coffees and biscuits because you're like, oh God, I need to get through the next meeting or whatever it is.
And that was always such the norm, that you had,
Yeah,
your mid-afternoon slump, you had your coffee or your sugar or your chocolate to keep you going. So I think there's something to do there about reframing mindsets, on a societal level too.
absolutely. Yeah. And these things, I think also I'd love for everyone to realize it's not an individual. You need to kind of advocate for yourself, be accountable for yourself. But we're living in this big society where we've got public health, we've got huge food companies, we've got pharmaceuticals. There's big powers at play. So it's no one's fault that, like, you didn't eat fat for years, or that actually you're eating this thing that because you're told that it's good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I always talk to people in coaching about, well, the past is gone. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, the action that you can take today, it doesn't matter if you didn't take the action yesterday because that's gone now. But, and the future's not yet here. So actually, what can you do in the present moment? What small step can you take today that might make a difference instead of chastising ourselves for,
Absolutely.
dieting or, not eating the right foods or not sort of nourishing our bodies. Um, I've also got a quick note here on my notes that I forgot to ask you about something called leaky gut.
Hmm.
I've read a bit about it, and I think it's about how the nutrients sort of permeate into the system, or are absorbed better or worse. And I wondered if it's something that you had done much work on.
Yeah, so leaky gut is also called intestinal permeability. That's the kind of official name. It's a really interesting area because, 10 plus years ago, that was something that was like, oh, that's nonsense, that's kind of woo-woo. But now it's understood that, it really is real. So we've got the lining in our gut. We have, kind of cell walls that are together, and they're back to back to back to back. So there should be no gaps in them, but they get leaky. So when we have a damaged digestive system, there is room basically for food particles and other things to get through into a digestive system. So whereas really they shouldn't be able to penetrate those walls, we're letting those things in, and then that can cause all kinds of digestive symptoms. So it's a particular, yeah, leaky gut's become like a very popular phrase, but I would I'd encourage people, as well, to remove, things like ultra processed food. Think about the environmental toxins. What are you breathing in? What dishwasher tablets are you using? All of those things that can damage the lining of the gut, and work on rebuilding that gut resilience to eliminate those symptoms.
Fascinating. There's so many different sort of layers, aren't there, when you're looking at working with the gut?
Yeah.
People just sometimes think, oh, it's just what you're putting in, but actually it's everything. It's the environment you're in, it's the level of stress, the emotional health. It's, as we started the podcast, it's all interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how are you living well now? And could you give our listeners maybe a couple of your lessons or pearls of wisdom that you've learned from going through the experience and the journey that you've gone through?
Yeah, I think the biggest one I've mentioned a few times, but I think it's learning to advocate for yourself. And there's places that you can go. So if you have Crohn's, there's Crohn's and Colitis UK, charities, and if you have various different disabilities or chronic diseases, there's often charities that have an advocacy arm to them. So get help as well. Advocate for yourself, get help, whether that's for someone to advocate for you, or whether that is a practitioner like me, or something similar, to actually get the advice, or a coach like someone who knows what they're doing. I think don't be so hard on yourself. Like you say, the kind of past is gone. You can only move forward. Keep an open mind as well. There's lots of different ways of it's become very polarizing, I think, the way people eat, paleo, vegan, keto. but actually there's no there's kind of no right or wrong. As long as you are eating in a balanced way, you're reducing processed food as much as possible, and you're eating what's right for you. I would stay curious, have an open mind, kind of think critically when someone says, oh, you should definitely take this, take the help and advocate for yourself.
Such great advice. Thank you so much. So where can our listeners find you or learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so my website is mollylove.co.uk, and I'm on Instagram, mollylove_functional nutrition.
Thank you for joining us on the Sick of It podcast, Molly.
Thanks so much for having me.